Cool. So this is Expatriation to New Zealand, my story and AMA. Kia ora koutou, no mai hari mai ki tēnei hui. No te whanganui a tara aho, ko whili toku tūranga waiwai, ko Peter te tahi atu haura o aho. Ko iwi taku tamahine, ko we toku whanu, ko Elise toku ingoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. So that's what's called a pepeha, and it's a kind of customary opening for important meetings, important gatherings here in New Zealand. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So a little bit about this session. As Steve mentioned, it's probably going to be 15 to 20 minutes of me talking, and then about 25 to 30 minutes where I'm really, really interested in questions from you folks. So my story is going to be pretty abbreviated. I definitely left a bunch of stuff out, and I want to be able to focus on the things that are the most interesting and important to you all. So ask away. As he mentioned, it's probably going to work best if we have like initial questions go into the Discord, and then they'll come in here in an orderly fashion, and we can do like follow-ups and clarifications and stuff live. So that's what that is. So a little bit about me. If you don't know me, I'm originally from New Jersey, but I lived in Philly starting in 2001. I've been a full-time software developer since 2008, though I also do management sometimes. I love to teach technology, coding, especially to beginners. I'm a crafter, a maker of all kinds of things, especially food, and a musician sometimes, not at the moment, but sometimes. I'm a wife and a mom, as we say here in New Zealand. And just thought I would list out, I recognize that in talking about my move to New Zealand, a lot of it has hinged on my privilege. And so just kind of like an acknowledgement of this is all the stuff that I've got going on. And I realize that a lot of other people would not have the same opportunities or have as easy of a time as I had. Making this move. So yes, there's my list. So as of 2017, I live in New Zealand. So I've been here a little bit over 3 years now, and a little bit of context of what New Zealand kind of is like in comparison to Philly at like a by the numbers kind of level. It's about 737 times the land area of Philadelphia. So you've got this map where you can see that it stretches pretty much from like North Carolina to Quebec. It's not small, but the population of New Zealand is 5.1 million as compared to the greater Philly metro area. So like not even Philly proper, but like the whole Philly area, 6.1 million. So New Zealand is a community roughly the same kind of scale as Philly. I'll also add that the Delaware Valley was first colonized in about 1625, but New Zealand was not colonized by Europeans until the 1830s and was actually one of the last large land masses on Earth that scientists think had people at all. So like nobody was there except the birds until about 1280. So quick answers. It is 7:30 on Sunday for me, and it is spring. So yes, I'm talking to you from the future, and the future is lovely. There's not a whole lot of COVID here. We've got it kind of under control, and life is pretty normal. I have not learned the haka. I have no idea if the water swirls the other way. I really have never figured out what that is about. And it's not at all like Australia. And this was a misconception that I had too before I came here. I was like, oh, it's like Australia, but just like a little further and smaller. And no, not really. So literally, how did I get here? So it was November 2016. I think we remember November 2016. And I was recruited by a very smart Canadian software company. I was in process with them actually for some time and almost moved to Ottawa. Like we were looking at houses in Ottawa, but it wound up falling through at the end. But over the course of that winter, it had occurred to me like, hey, wait, we're actually at a good place in our family right now. My partner was on hiatus. My daughter had not yet started school. And so we could just pick up and go, right? So I had been researching other countries where we might want to live and work. My partner mostly works with clients and pretty much just speaks English. So we kind of had to go to like an English speaking country. But I signed up for some immigration websites, mailing lists, things like that. And in February, I got an email about this program called Look-See Wellington. I should mention also that I will send out the slides. So there's some links in here for more stuff about some of these things. And Look-See Wellington was a really cool program, and I could talk in depth about what that was like. But the long story short is that in May, I was flown to New Zealand with about 100 other people to do interviews with potential employers, several local tech companies. I did not leave New Zealand with a job offer, but a few weeks later, I did get that job offer from Xero, which is where I still work. And then it was a pretty mad couple of months of, packing our house into a shipping container and doing like a little farewell tour of the East Coast mostly. And then family was on a plane. So August of 2017, we arrived here in New Zealand. And I started work in September. So like about 10 days after we got here. So there were some things that were surprises, and there were some things that were not in and of themselves surprises, but it was surprising how difficult they wound up being. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Superficial things, needing to find your new favorite everything, from, someone to cut your hair to, oh gosh, getting a car, I even forgot about that. But like at the grocery store, right? You imagine that everything that you're used to picking up at the grocery store probably isn't going to be there. And so that, like you need to find a new cereal that you like. And over here on the side is a photo of Tasty Cheese, which is what they basically call cheddar here. It's kind of cheddar, and Mainland is like one of the big national brands. So you get this big like 1 kg, which is like 1.8 pounds ish, block of cheese, and yeah, it's really good though, and it's really cheap. Well, nothing's really cheap here. Construction standards and other house stuff. So there's weird stuff about toilets. I can get started on that if you want, but I'll just say that there's weird stuff about toilets. Window screens, not really a thing here. So like bug screens, they just don't have them. So you open the windows, and if the bugs want to come in, the bugs come in. And I guess if birds want to come in, the birds come in. But yeah, that's because actually almost nothing here can kill you. And that brings you to flora and fauna. So yes, I definitely knew that the birds and the plants and everything was going to be different, which it is very different. But it's definitely interesting to be in a place where almost nothing can kill you, as I said. And so there's no wolves, there's no bears, there's no coyotes, there's no the biggest thing that you're going to encounter most of the time when you go out into the wild is like maybe like a feral dog. There are other animals that were brought over by the colonists. Like pigs and deer and stuff and goats that have gotten wild, but that's very uncommon. So generally, the only thing that you're going to find on the ground is a hedgehog. That's it. There's hedgehogs, and they're awful. They're pests. Possums sometimes, but anyway, nothing's going to kill you. The plants are really different. It's cool. It means that you like can't buy a book off the internet that tells you what things are okay to eat out in the wild because the plants are totally different. The seasons are reversed, and that I knew, obviously, but it's weird. It's really weird. So like when I say July, you think of hot weather. It doesn't get hot here, but it's actually the middle of winter in July. And so things like that, like when is your birthday? Oh, well, now my birthday is in the autumn. So it's hard to get used to. Hot Christmas we have, like I said, it doesn't actually get hot here, but too hot for like probably your ugly sweaters. British slang and spellings. It's actually, there's way more of that than I would have expected, and I'm still learning new terms and phrases that just seem completely bizarre. Like last week I learned lucky dip. Lucky dip is apparently like their term for like drawing things out of a hat, kind of. And it makes a crossword really hard because there's lots of extra letters in things. Metric, also really hard to get used to. You know, it's definitely something that I knew, but there's all this conversion. How big is a kilogram? How many kilograms do I weigh? I had a doctor asking me because they were going to like inject me with something. And I'm like, I have no idea. Can you do the math? I'll give you the pounds. Earthquakes are like a really normal everyday thing here. So everybody's got their furniture attached to the walls, and if you go to like a big event, at the beginning, they won't just tell you like where the bathrooms are and the fire exits. They'll have to they're like legally obligated to tell you what to do in an earthquake. So yeah, earthquakes totally normal here, which maybe is familiar if you're like from California. But yeah, driving on the wrong side of the road, man. Oh, I do not like that either. So stuff that's a little bit more cultural. The relationship with indigenous tradition and language is really different here than what I've experienced in the United States. So the Māori population, which is the indigenous people, is about 16% in New Zealand, which is, you know, definitely higher than we would be used to, definitely higher than we would expect in many parts of the United States. We also have about 9% Pacific Islanders that are not Māori. And I want to say the Asian population is about 15%. Oh, I'm skipping ahead to diversity. Looks really different here. But relationships with indigenous tradition and language. So about 4% of the population in New Zealand speaks some Māori, which is Māori Te Reo, the language of the Māori, is what the Papeha was given in at the beginning of this presentation. So yeah, I think that despite it still being a difficult relationship and it definitely not being perfect, that the colonizers have tried. There's at least a level of effort in kind of making things right. We do have what's called the Treaty of Waitangi, which is basically because the English settlers couldn't manage to subjugate the indigenous population. And so they wound up having to reach a treaty in 1840. And of course, the treaty itself is incredibly shady. The English version of the treaty does not translate accurately into the Te Reo version of the treaty that was given to the Māori. So essentially, they agreed to different things. But it's probably still a better working relationship than what exists in the US. So super excited about that. That's pretty cool. Wokeness or lack thereof. Yeah, I would say that in terms of like social activism and social justice, that things in New Zealand are definitely behind where they were in the US. So, you know, we've got people somewhat regularly questioning the need for diversity and inclusion practices and things like that. Like people kind of don't get it yet. You know, I hear a lot of like, oh, as the father of daughters, you know, like that kind of nonsense. And so that's definitely taken some getting used to. As I mentioned, diversity looks really different here. There is like very, very, very little African immigrant population. And so just like looking around Wellington looks extremely different than looking around Philly. And that definitely takes some getting used to. But as I mentioned, we've got like some other populations that are fairly well represented, and actually, I don't know if this is just my company or somehow just the people that I've connected with, but the LGBT plus community, I think, is remarkably well represented and visible in a lot of the places that I've been here in New Zealand. So again, diversity looks really different. Shopping is a really different experience. Amazon will ship to New Zealand some things really slowly for a lot of money. And so generally, what that means is that we'll be shopping local New Zealand businesses. So small business still exists here and in many cases is thriving. There's a mall like 15 minutes from my house and it's like walking into 1998. Like I feel like I'm going prom shopping. It's like an actual mall with like stores and stuff, and it's like so yeah, shopping is really different here because basically those like mega companies haven't managed to kill all the small businesses, and in general it's just extremely not American. So what do I mean by that? Work-life balance is a real thing, like actually real, and not just lip service. Like you leave work to go pick up your kids, and like you're actually, nobody's going to hold it against you, and you don't have to worry about whether anybody's going to hold it against you. Everybody likes to take these long holidays where they unplug and they go like, you know, walk down a mountain range or something. Like for real, for real. It's generally just not as intensely capitalist, which has its ups and downs. Certainly, as an American, we have certain expectations of how we are going to interact, like with other businesses. You know, like what does customer service look like, and that translates a little strangely here. So, you know, a lot of times it's hard to get people to understand, like, I am the customer and I paid for this thing, and something is wrong, and they're like, that sucks. So I'll kind of tie that into the, they don't really also culturally have the constant drive to improve things that I've noticed is apparently a hallmark of other cultures, not here. And an example that I like to talk about with that is that, that in all the houses I've lived in New Zealand, which is not a ton, but like 3 or 4 at this point, there's a bathtub, right? And the bathtub has when you drain the bathtub, it makes this horrifying sound, like this awful sucking sound. And this is consistent. This is normal. And I've talked to Kiwis about it, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I always hated that as a kid." And I tell you, my daughter hates it. Like it's awful. It's a terrible sound. And you're probably like, what the hell? What are you talking about? Bathtubs don't make a sound, right? Because that is not something that I ever experienced in the United States. And, you know, encountered my fair share of bathtubs, like any fully grown American human. Like there's bathtubs. And yeah, and they like, so clearly my thought is that this is not a difficult problem. It's probably not an expensive thing to solve, and it's probably not a new solution that just hasn't made its way here yet, right? Like it's bathtubs shouldn't have to make this noise, but they don't care. They're like, oh yeah, that's a terrible noise. And so, so like it's just they have a phrase here that they're very well known for, which is "she'll be right, mate," which is just like, well, it'll all work out. Because you know what, that bathtub noise isn't killing anybody. Like it's fine, I guess, as long as you, yep, it's fine. So social welfare programs change everything. So there's a whole list of some of the stuff that we have in New Zealand down here, but I'll just, I guess, try to sum it up and say that there's a really different relationship between your life and work when you're, you know, healthcare isn't tied to work, for example. But there's also, you know, guaranteed sick leave, employee protections, livable wages, holiday overtime, like for restaurants too, and like it's just is really different. It's really different. So a handful of tips that I would say I think will apply probably to, you know, emigrating to anywhere. The adjustment period is real and really hard. So there's a chart there on the right, and that's actually from one of the New Zealand immigration websites. And I did rip off one of the access labels, so sorry data people, but for space, it is sentiment over time. And you can see there's that curve where you get there at the 0 month mark and you're like, yeah, this is the best. And then, you know, by about 18 months, you're like, actually, there's a lot of things wrong here. And by the way, I really miss my mom. And then eventually it kind of like evens out. And you're like, you know what? Life is pretty good. So yeah, making new friends, also really hard. It's not something I think I was especially ever that great at, but also just like dropping into a whole new culture with like nobody you know. And it's like, okay, this stuff is difficult. Sign up for government and immigration lawyers newsletters. So that was kind of how I found out about the program that I wound up coming to New Zealand through. Definitely, if you have places in mind that you're thinking about going, this is a good plan. You may someday need an immigration lawyer. I did. So the first visa application went totally smoothly, but then when it was out and we were doing our application for residency, we had some miscommunications. Yes, and I was unlawfully in New Zealand for about 10 days. So culture differences may be bigger than you expect. I kind of talked about that. Even though we came to a very like Western, also colonized by the English speaking country, like it was still way more different than I expected. And when evaluating salary offers, just look at the market that you're moving to. I made myself crazy trying to figure out like, oh, with the currency conversion and the cost of living and the market rates, like it's too many layers. Like what is the difference when you're not paying for healthcare? What is the difference in the taxes that you're going to pay? It just was like too many layers of translation. And so my suggestion, take it or leave it, is just look at the market rates of what people are being paid there. So we are on to the AMA portion, and I went a little bit longer than I thought I was going to go, but we are now open for questions. There was one very kind comment, not a question, in my AMA form, but aside from that, I don't think I had anything else provided to me in advance. So do we have questions in the chat?
So there is one question from Ben Shive, who's wondering how much winter there is because his wife hates the cold.
That is a good question. So I generally describe the weather in Wellington as ranging from cold Philly spring to warm Philly spring. It pretty much gets between, oh gosh, and now we're back into the metric conversions again, because I know it never gets below freezing here, or hardly ever. It snows, I think, in Wellington about once every 10 years. And in summer, I would say it is a very, very rare day that gets hotter than like mid 80s. So yeah, Philly cold spring to Philly warm spring. But at least in Wellington, it is also extraordinarily windy and damp most of the time. So yeah, there's like crappy days even in summer. Awesome question though.
So we're getting a flood of questions now. So
yay, I love questions.
So Kristen asks, what were the criteria to be eligible for permanent residency?
There are a lot. I guess the best thing I would say is take a look at the immigration website. It is generally pretty good. So the way that I did it was we came in on what's called an accredited employer work visa, which means that I work for a company that immigration is recognized as like bringing in good people or something like that. And then we were here for 2 years. And after 2 years on the work visa, you can apply for residency. And the requirements are very similar. It's stuff about like being in good health and not having a good, certain stuff on our criminal record, I guess. And, if you're bringing a partner, proving that you're actually partnered. But there's some like language requirements, there's some education stuff that like all of these things kind of count for points generally, and you're aiming for like things to stack up well enough. And then for residency, it's basically just like, is all this stuff still true? Are you genuinely have you genuinely relocated all your stuff here? Kind of like you're not keeping feet in multiple worlds kind of thing. And then there is also a specific thing that allows you, if you meet a certain salary threshold, to apply for permanent residency at the same time as you apply for residency. So there's kind of like a little shortcut in there that we were able to use. So yeah, permanent residence, which means we could vote. It was very exciting. I got to vote for, not for Jacinda, because that's not how the political system works here, but yeah. Cool, awesome question. Let me know, Kristen, if there's more than I can answer about that.
So there's a question from Jamie asking, were there any other countries you strongly considered?
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, Canada was actually the thing that kicked this whole affair off. It really looked like I was going to move to Canada. Like I bought boots. Yeah, I bought boots and a coat, and I was like reading Canada is really interesting because they make you take a language test even if you're a native speaker. And that's like a really kind of difficult, challenging stumbling block because they only offer like the specific test in a couple specific places, and it's really expensive. And so you basically have to like, you may have to like go to Canada or wait several months to take the test in DC or whatever, even if you're an English speaker. So anyway, so yes, I was looking at Canada. So I could tell you some things about Canadian immigration.
So then Nick is asking, which of these options to go with? Was Look-See its own thing?
Yes, Look-See was its own thing. They are still running some version of that now, but they've definitely, in subsequent years, they've changed the focus. So the initial Look-See was specifically geared at bringing overseas tech talent at like a mid to senior level to Wellington. So later, Look-Sees have focused on like construction business because we have a shortage of people who do construction, I guess, and like bringing people to Auckland and some other things like that. So, so Look-See was its own program. They are still running some form of it. It was really cool because it meant that I got to come over and do interviews in person, but not at my expense. So that definitely made a big difference. I feel like in the way the world is going right now, that it probably is more possible now than it would have been then to do all the interviews remote and get a job before coming here.
David Dylan Thomas has a question that he'd like to ask over audio.
Go for it. Hey.
Hey, how's it going? I've been fascinated by New Zealand's choice to focus on gross national happiness as kind of one of the key economic indicators instead of just GDP. And I've never talked to anyone who lives in a country that's made that choice. So I'm just curious, are there like knock-on effects? Does it feel different? Does this affect daily life in any way? Just curious about that.
I've actually never heard of that. So I don't know. It doesn't sound like, I mean, I guess I could just be oblivious. Like that's always a possibility. But yeah, I mean, generally I would say that it does, well, like I was saying, right, like it's not as much of a focus on capitalism as much as there's like these social welfare programs. And you know, certainly there are absolutely still problems here. Child poverty, the suicide rates are actually really high, which it would not surprise me if that tied into their interest in focusing on that metric. But yeah, so I think so. I mean, I think it's, quality of life is really different. You know, I mean, I've gotten into arguments with strangers on Facebook, right, about like, oh, you know, don't move to those countries, everything's really expensive and they'll charge you a lot of taxes. And it's like, yeah, and like life is really good, like gun policy, and you know, I mean, like it's just it's good. So it's not apples to apples at all. Things are really expensive here, but you know what, totally worth it.
It's like you get what you pay for.
Yeah, well, exactly, right? Oh, completely.
So Tim Allen asked a funny question. He asked another serious one later, but he says, wait, Philly has a spring?
Yes, it's that week when you get like the really hot day and the really cold day next to each other, but that's spring.
6 hours of spring we had last year, yeah.
So then Pam asks, you mentioned some about wokeness and race. When, what are your impressions of class and classism you've experienced and as an immigrant yourself?
That is a really good question. I have had probably a really limited perspective on this because I've been pretty much just in Wellington, which is the second biggest city after Auckland, and all government. So there definitely, you know, I mean, there definitely are classes. I feel like the middle class may be a bit wider of a part of the curve here in New Zealand than in the US, but that's kind of just a gut impression. Yeah, sorry, I don't know that I have a great answer for that. I think yes, still class differences. I don't like I know we have super rich people here, and most of them are probably Americans. But that it's not like a big thing that I interact with every day. If there's anything I can do to help answer that question better, please let me know.
So Sarah asks, did you move with any pets?
No pets for us. We did have, so a lot of my best mates, my best friends who I've had here in New Zealand have been people that actually came through Looksee at the same time as me. So other folks who got jobs and kind of participated in that program because it was fun. There was like 100 of us and we were all just like hanging out basically for a week while we were doing all these job interviews. And so some of my Looksee friends did bring pets, and it was a big to-do with quarantining the pets. And I think they've actually since then, they have closed the animal quarantine in Wellington. And so they might need to quarantine in Auckland now. I'm really not sure about that, sorry.
So then Oates asks, what aspect of your life in New Zealand, what aspect of your life in New Zealand that you like the best?
There's a lot of good things here. I mean, really generally, I would say that work-life balance thing is pretty epic. Like, I actually turn off all my stuff at the end of the day. And there was one time I took a week off because I was moving house, and like I kept checking in, and my team was like, "Go away," and so like it's very sincere that like work is only a part of your life. It's not your whole life. And so that's like an interesting kind of like underlying thing that you would not get if you came here on vacation, right? But like kind of a less culturally related thing is, and maybe just more specific to my life, is that trying to, the thing I mentioned about the grocery store and trying to find like all your new favorite things. There were some times when we were just like, I did not have the energy to try like 7 different kinds of ketchup or whatever and figure out which one I actually want to spend money on and like throw away all that packaging. And like New Zealand is also very like eco-friendly. So we care about things like, why would I buy 7 kinds of ketchup and then have to throw away 7 bottles of ketchup? So I've started making my own of a lot of things, not ketchup specifically. I will though. But yeah, things like condiments is actually a pretty big one. So like I make my own mustard now and my own relish, and like, because you know, I just don't have the energy to try a billion things and get it wrong. So it's much easier to do in the kitchen than to do in the grocery store. So making stuff, I like to make stuff, and I feel like I've become more of a maker since coming to New Zealand.
Cool. So Jessica Ann has a question that she's asked over audio.
Hey, nice to see you, by the way.
Hey,
been a while. You know, I'm going through some of my retirement stuff right now, so it's on my mind. When you have, let's say, 401ks and stuff like that from yours and Peter's former employers, what do you do with that stuff?
You can ask me when I figure it out. At the moment, I've just left them. So one thing I did do was consolidate everything before I left the country. So, which, you know, I should have been doing all along, but didn't. So everything's all in one place now. And I have talked to the bank that holds them all, and they know that I'm here and they know about me. So I probably at some point I'll cash it out. There are retirement plans and retirement funds that are run by the government here in New Zealand. It's called Kiwi Saver. We have not been eligible for it until we became residents, which was just a few months ago now. So we have not dealt with that yet. I'm totally happy to keep you in the loop when I figure that stuff out, though. By the way, everybody's welcome. Yeah, everybody's welcome to do that too. My Twitter handle is on the Discord, and yeah, totally feel free to keep in touch. You can actually ask me anything anytime. So what do we got? I know we've got like a few minutes left in this session.
We got a bit of time left. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So Javon asks, have you met Gabe Newell?
No, I have not met Gabe. Yeah, not here anyway. Nor Amanda Palmer. None of the Americans who are trapped here have crossed paths with me yet.
Mark asks, do you still pay U.S. federal tax?
Generally, no. So we have an accountant now, or somebody who does our taxes, I should say, because we had been doing them ourselves until we left the U.S. And then we were like, this is now too complicated. It's time to outsource this work. And the longer story is that we are still on the hook for, filing. But for the most part, there's a mutual agreement between the US and many other countries that if you're paying a bunch of taxes on your income that's earned in that country, then you probably will be exempt from paying related taxes in the US. So sometimes we have like other tax related things that are like we sold our house, for example. But generally, no, the US does not further tax our income beyond what we've already paid in New Zealand. Great question.
I'm gonna mispronounce her name. Hang on, let me look at the Daysing. Daysing asks, have you had a chance to explore the country or other countries in the region?
That is a big no. I have not at all. So I've kind of just been like really heads down on work, and which I know kind of defies that whole work-life balance thing. But I've been taking my staycations mostly. We have been maybe like halfway or like a third of the way up the North Island to do like some of the smaller glowworm caves and stuff, and done like a little bit of hiking, and there's farms that are just a couple hours outside the city. So like I have gotten out of town, but not like a lot. My partner and my daughter have done the road trip all the way up to Hobbiton and done like the feast and what have you. But that was actually part of my birthday gift, is that I got to stay home alone. So I'm a little bit of an inside kitty. Yeah, so not too much, but I know that I should, and I definitely will. And I think I'm actually going to drag a work friend of mine out to maybe do like hot pools or something in the South Island, because she hasn't explored the South Island either. Kiwis are usually so good at exploring outside the country, but not as good at exploring inside the country. Some of them.
I feel like that's true everywhere.
I'm sure.
You never explore your own area.
Exactly.
So Tim Allen has a question that he'd like to ask over audio. This is a real question.
Okay.
I'm just curious. So I've looked at possibly moving around a little bit, but have never been able to pull the trigger just because of how much I love Philly. What do you find that you really miss about Philly? What are a couple of things you really miss?
Oh my gosh.
And are any of them really unexpected?
Well, I miss all you all. Let me think. I feel like there's food that I'm like, it's like trying to bubble up to the top of my brain. What are like food things that I miss from Philly? Oh, we miss water ice. Like there's Dairy Queen. Oh. So there is Dairy Queen in New Zealand, but I think you have to like go pretty far for it. Like I think there might be one in Auckland, but
you didn't say the faint urine smell of septa, I
noticed. I
wanted it to be faint.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, no, I do. I kind of miss some things about transit. We have a really good bus system here, but it's still buses, and so they'll show up like generally whenever the hell they want. But it has really good coverage, and it's way too expensive. But yeah, so we have pretty decent transit here. I miss Dairy Queen a lot. One thing that I don't miss, which I completely forgot to mention because I just don't even think about it anymore? I'll tell you what, like quality of life. I have not been harassed on the street since I moved to New Zealand. I have not been catcalled. I have not been whistled at. I don't think I've been followed. Like it's a remarkably different experience. So love that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and then Nick also has a question he'd like to ask over audio.
Hello. Is my audio working?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. First, excuse me, this is unrelated, but I just realized I'm wearing my Webstock shirt, which is a conference that happens in Wellington.
I love Webstock. I went last year. Yeah, I guess I didn't do it this year.
Okay. Were you there in 2018?
No, 2019.
Okay, cool. So my question was, how did your family adjust, and how did you kind of sell them on it?
The ones that I brought or the ones that I left behind?
Yeah, mostly the ones that went with you.
Yeah, well, like I said, I mean, it was a really good time. So my husband had been, he had left the startup he was at to essentially be a stay-at-home dad. He had kind of like felt like he was missing out on too much of our daughter, who at the time, I guess when he left there, she was like 2.5. And so he was still home and thinking about getting back into the workforce. And my daughter was 3.5 when we were thinking about moving. And so we were like, oh, if we're going to move, then now would really be the time. And so this was kind of just like an ongoing conversation with my partner, as you know, hey, this Canadian company recruited me. And then several months later, I literally got an email, and I was just looking at this yesterday when I was writing my slides. I got an email from Immigration New Zealand that was like, hey, we've got this Lixie program that'll do X, Y, and Z, or Z as they say here, X, Y, and Z. And I forwarded the email to him, and I said, should I apply for this? Like that was the beginning of everything. And at the time it was kind of a joke, because it was like, New Zealand, is that even a real place? And now here we are. So yeah, it's definitely been a joint decision this whole way. My family was incredibly supportive, and we're like on very good terms, but we're not like tight, like call each other every week kind of family. And so they were just like, wow, we are really going to miss you, but that's so awesome. Have a great time. Let us know how we can help, basically. His family was a little bit harder, but also we're not as close with them. So it was oh well, maybe they'll come visit us.
Do you think your daughter is going to develop a Kiwi accent?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's already words where she like couldn't possibly tell you how to spell them because she's only heard them in a Kiwi accent. And so like, it's complicated. But yes, absolutely. I mean, I might even already have like a little bit of a Kiwi accent. I couldn't tell you, you could tell me. I definitely say things that they say here. Like fortnightly. That's a great word.
Sweet as, bro.
Sweet as.
So there are 2 more questions left, just because we're getting a little close to the end here. So Rob asks, how hard / expensive is it for you to move your stuff overseas?
I just had like a heart thing in relation to that. Okay, yeah, it's a lot of money. We packed up our 4-bedroom house, and we have a lot of stuff. We have a very American amount of stuff, and we took basically an entire shipping container. And I would not recommend that. If you can avoid it. Sell all your belongings. Bring a duffel bag, because it's thousands upon thousands of dollars, like down payment on a house money. It's really expensive. I did have a relocation allowance from work, but I think it like just covered our plane tickets pretty much. So yeah, super expensive. If you can bring less stuff over, definitely bring less stuff. Of course, it is also really expensive to buy new things once you get here, but still, I think cheaper.
And so the last question that we'll ask, and again, everyone feel free to ask afterwards. So Lauren, she jumped in late. So she said she's not sure if you mentioned this already, but are you planning on staying in New Zealand permanently and becoming a citizen?
That is such a good question. Yes, basically, yes. We have permanent residency, and I think we have to be here for another 3 years before we can apply for citizenship. But yeah, that is the plan at the moment. We're probably going to build a house, maybe. We'll see. Thank you. Thank you all so, so much. If you want, Steve, should we designate like a hallway room, or are people hopping into hallways?
So you can create a new room, or you can, if you want to just do text, you can still use the channel that's open for your chat.
Perfect.
And you can go through for that.
Cool.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to end the recording now.